Resuming debate, the honourable for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I'll be splitting my time with a wonderful member from Sarnia-Lambton. Once again, I find myself standing up in this place, along with my Conservative colleagues, to speak on the behalf of my constituents of Hastings, Lennox and Addington, to speak on behalf of struggling Canadians who are concerned about the cost of living. Just this week in particular, one of my constituents posted on her social media, "As per our weekend routine, today I went to fill up my car and buy groceries for our family. This routine normally costs around $300. Today it was $500. Seriously, how are people surviving right now? I don't normally get too shaken up about things like this, but we've been in a constant state of transition for 3+ years now, always pivoting, always trying to find out a way to figure out a new plan for the way we do things. I know there were parents out there struggling before inflation, and I can't even imagine what is keeping you up at night now." That's what she shared. Madam Speaker, while this government often hand waves their role in inflation domestically, there's one area where they could make things better: lowering prices at the pumps for Canadians. They can't wait till carbon tax rebate season for money to buy groceries and medication that they need today. But then again, I suppose that the point of the tax makes it prohibitively expensive to drive. Of course, this completely ignores the plight of rural Canadians who literally depend on a vehicle in order to survive. The carbon tax is only driving up fuel prices, and it's disabling business owners in my riding. That's why the Conservatives tried to put a halt to the bleeding by introducing an Opposition Day motion to reduce prices by 5%. And sadly, this was not supported. In March of this year, while I was speaking to that motion, I urged the members of this place to consider the official opposition's realistic, tangible, and direct solutions for Canadians suffering from high prices. I noted that up until this date, this legislature's reaction to those gas price increases were completely inadequate. 2.5 months later, nothing has changed except that the price of gas continues to rise. Mr. Speaker, in a few short weeks, this House will adjourn for summer recess while we go home to our respective ridings to work locally. As a legislature, we will have no capacity to provide relief for single parents, low-income families, seniors, or small businesses. They will face continuing increases to their groceries, to their gas, and to their basic necessities of their life. In my humble opinion, Mr. Speaker, this country is spinning in a downward spiral, and we need leadership. We need to provide something to Canadians so that they don't feel abandoned for the next 2.5 months. Today, in our motion, we are offering a chance to put politics aside and deliver the relief that Canadians need. Every single day, I speak to the constituents in my riding. They are worried. They are having trouble sleeping. People just don't feel like they can get ahead. Mr. Speaker, young families are being busted apart because of financial stress. Too many seniors are feeling helpless, ignored, and their quality of life is failing. On top of all that, food insecurity is staring people in the face. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we have been trying in vain to provide some sort of relief, to no avail. I know my honourable colleagues have already pointed this out, but I feel it necessary to reiterate. As previously stated, when gas prices continue to increase, we ask that the government suspend the GST on fuel to give Canadians a break. We asked again for relief for Canadians by suspending the carbon tax increase on April 1st. And we also asked that the tariff on fertilizer bought before March 2nd be removed in order to help our agricultural producers. Look, I recognize it can be difficult for some people to accept a good idea when it comes from somebody else. Perhaps that is why this government stubbornly refused to follow through with the previous government's decision to purchase the F-35s, despite everyone, apart from the lobbyists working for competitors, knowing it was the right decision. With all barb aside, I do implore this government and this House to take substantive, meaningful, and timely action to help Canadians out because they cannot afford to wait. I know that I am not the only one that is seeing regular, everyday Canadians struggle with the cost of living. Mr. Speaker, we in this chamber have a tremendous responsibility. It's enormous. But we also must never forget those people that sent us here. Canadians are suffering with high cost of fuel, food, and housing. Mr. Speaker, the taxpayers that put the confidence in us to be in this place, they don't get a housing allowance. They don't have travel points, and they cannot claim any meal allowance. It's no wonder that many Canadians are losing faith in their elected officials. They turn on the news and they see the highlights of Question Period, which often is a little more than theater. I suppose this is the natural result of a legislature that puts more focus on communication and sound bites instead of good policy. A very wise man, if at times a very difficult man, saw this trend starting in the 1980s. The late member for Yukon and Deputy Prime Minister Eric Nielsen lamented this shift to focus on commentary, interviews, and opinion papers. The soundbite was the goal, not the substance or the discussion. Nuance was dying in front of his eyes, and his autobiography, he tried to warn us. In a similar vein, the individual who gave the inaugural televised speech in the UK House of Commons, Ian Gow, said in November of 1989, quote, "I have always voted against the televising of the proceedings of this House, and I expect that I always will." The brief intervention earlier this month, of the Honourable Member for Bradford South, Mr. Cryer, did nothing to alter my view. Despite my strongly held opinions, a letter that I received 3 weeks ago, I believe that a copy was sent to each of us, and possibly even to you, Mr. Speaker, made the following preposterous assertion: the impression you make on television depends mainly on your image, 55%, with your voice and your body language accounting for 38% of your impact. Only 7% actually depends on what you're saying. This is sad. Mr. Speaker, while Ian Gow and indeed the entirety of the Parliament at the time thought those claims preposterous, there is no denying that the quality of debate and level of cooperation has declined and been largely replaced with imagery, with theatre. And cursory reading of the historical Hansards will show this. The fact that the NDP felt it necessary to surrender their money-scrutinizing authority to the Liberal government in order for a promise shows this. Every single person in this room, including my good friends on our side of the House, we need to do the job that we were sent here to do, to work with other parties and fight for the best interests of all Canadians. To my colleagues across the aisle, please exercise a minimal amount of humility. Adopting this Conservative Opposition Day motion would do just that. Thank you.